Hey everyone, and welcome. Are you ready to go deep? Today we're off to southeastern Europe, to a city that's seen it all, Plovdiv, Bulgaria.
Plovdiv, yes. A fascinating choice, and definitely one that rewards, well, a deep dive.
It's not every day you get to explore a place that's 8,000 years old. Okay, so full disclosure, I was blown away when I saw that number 8,000 years of continuous habitation. That's what the Bulgarian Wikipedia page on Plovdiv says.
It's true. Makes you realize what a blip in time, well, most historical timelines really are, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, so we've got these excerpts from the Bulgarian Wikipedia page on Plovdiv to guide us. And I know you always say this, but it's especially true here. We're not just skimming the surface, we want to uncover the layers, right?
Absolutely. And with Plovdiv, those layers run deep. I mean, think about it. 8,000 years of human history, all concentrated in one place. To understand Plovdiv today, you have to dig into that history, unravel those layers.
Okay, so where do we even begin? I mean, 8,000 years, that's a lot of ground to cover.
You're right, it can be overwhelming. How about we start with the basics? Plovdiv's location. It's situated on a plain in south-central Bulgaria, strategically located at this crossroads of ancient trade routes.
Okay, so prime real estate, even back then.
Exactly. And those 6 hills, the tepetas, they would have been a huge draw too. Natural protection, great views, always a plus.
Yeah, those hills are iconic. You can't picture Plovdiv without them. Speaking of iconic, we have to talk about the city's many names. Plovdiv has had more names than I've had hot dinners.
Oh,
seriously. Eumolpias, Philippopolis, Felipe, Plovdiv, what's the story there?
Well, like most things with Plovdiv, it goes back to its long and, well, let's be honest, often turbulent history. Each name change usually signifies a major shift in power, a new ruler, a new empire.
Okay, so it's like a linguistic Game of Thrones, with each name representing who held sway over the city at that time. So let's break it down. First up, we have Eumolpias.
Right. Eumolpias, that name takes us all the way back to, well, it depends on who you ask and which sources you consult, but likely sometime in the first millennium BC. Legend has it that the city was founded by, or at least named after, a Thracian king, Eumolpus.
The Thracians, those were the folks who lived in this region before the Greeks and the Macedonians came knocking, right?
Precisely. And they were a fascinating bunch, fierce warriors, skilled horsemen, and they had this rich culture steeped in mythology and ritual.
Okay, so we've got this ancient Thracian city, probably a pretty happening place in its day, and then along comes Philip II of Macedon. And he decides what this place needs a rebrand.
Something like that. Philip II, father of Alexander the Great, very ambitious ruler, remember.
Yeah.
He conquers the city in 342 BC, and, well, what do conquerors do? They plant their flag, both literally and figuratively.
Ah, so Philippopolis is born. And I'm guessing those impressive city walls mentioned in the Wikipedia article, those are probably part of his makeover too.
You know it. Philip II wasn't just about renaming cities. He knew how to fortify them, make them practically impregnable. Those walls were a statement. Plovdiv was now a key city in the Macedonian Empire.
Okay, so Philip had his moment, but then, like you said, new rulers, new empires, and in this case, the Romans show up.
And the Romans, they definitely weren't known for their subtlety.
Not at all. So how does Plovdiv fare under Roman rule? What becomes of Philip's namesake city?
Well, let's just say the Romans, they definitely left their mark on Plovdiv. They recognized its strategic importance. Situated on the Via Militaris, it was this vital road connecting the Balkans to Constantinople.
So still a prime location, even centuries later.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing about the Romans. They weren't just about conquest and control. I mean, they were, but they also understood the power of, well, let's call it soft power.
Soft power.
Winning over the locals, not just through military might, but by making Plovdiv a desirable place to live. So they invested in infrastructure, public buildings. The city flourished as this cultural hub.
Which brings us to those incredible Roman ruins scattered throughout the city. The ancient theater, for example, it's amazingly well preserved. You can practically hear the echoes of the crowds, imagine the gladiatorial contests and performances that took place there.
It's awe-inspiring, isn't it, to stand in that space and think, people were entertained here 2,000 years ago. And don't forget the Roman stadium. We're not talking about some small-town arena. This thing could hold tens of thousands of spectators.
Tens of thousands? That's bigger than some modern sports stadiums.
This gives you a sense of the scale and grandeur the Romans brought to Plovdiv. This is a major center of their empire, not just some provincial backwater.
Mind-blowing. And to think so much of it is still standing, even after all these centuries.
Well, maybe not all of it.
True, true. Okay, so we've got this thriving Roman city, but empires, they don't last forever, do they? What happens to Plovdiv after the Roman Empire, well, when in Rome?
Ah, yes, when in Rome. Well, after the Romans, Plovdiv. It gets a bit messy. We're talking centuries of shifting powers, changing alliances, a bit of a historical roller coaster ride.
Hit me with it.
Okay, so fast forward a few centuries, and we've got the Byzantine Empire entering the scene. Plovdiv becomes part of Byzantium, which, if you remember, was the eastern half of the Roman Empire that survived long after the western half fell apart.
Right. Constantinople, all that.
Exactly. So under Byzantine rule, Plovdiv, it's still strategically important, still a major city, and it becomes a significant religious center. Churches and monasteries spring up, adding a whole new layer to the city's architectural landscape.
Okay, so Byzantines, churches, monasteries, what else? Give me the Spark Notes version of the next few centuries.
Well, we could spend hours on this, but to make a long story short, Plovdiv changes hands a few more times. The first Bulgarian Empire, the Byzantines again, the second Bulgarian Empire, it's a bit of a back and forth. And then, in the 14th century, a new power emerges. The Ottomans.
The Ottomans. We can't talk about Plovdiv without mentioning their influence. I mean, the Zumaya Mosque, the Imaret Mosque, those are some pretty prominent landmarks in the city today.
Absolutely. The Ottomans, they conquered Plovdiv in the 14th century, and their influence is still visible today, woven into the fabric of the city.
It's like walking through a living timeline, You've got these Roman ruins right next to Ottoman mosques, Byzantine churches alongside buildings from the Bulgarian National Revival.
Exactly. It's that layering, that blending of different styles and traditions that makes Plovdiv so unique. And speaking of the Bulgarian National Revival, that's another fascinating chapter in Plovdiv's story.
Right. I saw that mentioned in the Wikipedia article. What was that all about?
Well, imagine this. After centuries of Ottoman rule, Bulgarians are starting to rediscover their heritage, their language, their identity. This wave of cultural and political awakening starts to sweep through the region.
And Plovdiv, it's right in the thick of it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Plovdiv becomes a center of this national revival. We see this flourishing of Bulgarian literature, art, music, all of it fueled by this desire to reclaim their cultural identity.
I read about these beautiful Bulgarian revival houses with their asymmetrical designs and intricate woodwork. They sound amazing.
They are something else. Those houses weren't just homes. They were statements. Think about it. Bulgarians were reclaiming their city, their culture, and they expressed it through their architecture. These houses were a physical manifestation of Bulgaria's national pride.
Wow. It's incredible how architecture can be this powerful symbol of cultural identity.
It really is. And that brings us to the 20th century. Plovdiv keeps evolving, keeps growing. It becomes a major industrial center.
And in 2019, Plovdiv is named the European Capital of Culture. That's a pretty big deal.
It is. And it speaks volumes about how far Plovdiv has come, how it's embraced its past while looking towards the future.
It's quite a journey, from ancient Thracian settlement to modern European capital of culture. Plovdiv has seen it all. I mean, talk about a city that's constantly reinventing itself. But what's it like today? If we were to actually walk those streets, what would we experience?
You'd experience this fascinating mix of old and new, ancient and modern, all these layers of history coexisting. You might be walking down a narrow cobblestone street, past these beautifully preserved Bulgarian revival houses, and then turn a corner and find yourself face to face with a Roman ruin.
It's like those 8,000 years are woven into the very fabric of the city. Speaking of which, as we were diving into the Wikipedia page, a few things really jumped out at me. Did you read about the Plovdiv house and its unique architecture? They're described as having these asymmetrical layouts and these amazingly elaborate decorations.
Ah, yes. The Plovdiv house, it's a style that's really distinct to the city. And it's not just about aesthetics. Those asymmetrical designs, they often reflect the needs of the family or the craftsmen who live there. You might have a room specifically for weaving, for example, or a workshop for carpentry. So the houses themselves tell a story, a story of the people and their trades.
It's amazing how something as simple as a house can reveal so much about a culture. And hey, speaking of things that reveal a lot about a culture, did you see that little tidbit about Plovdiv having over 500 local publications in the early 20th century? Newspapers, literary magazines, the whole shebang.
500. That's wild. It paints this picture of a really intellectually vibrant city, a place where ideas were being debated and shared.
Yeah.
Definitely challenges the image of Plovdiv as, a sleepy Balkan town.
Not sleepy at all. And as if we needed more reasons to be captivated by Plovdiv, there's that story about how a single cavalry squadron basically bluffed its way into capturing the city in 1878 during the Russo-Turkish War.
It's those little anecdotes, those quirky details that really bring a history to life. It reminds us that even amidst all the grand narratives of empires and conquests, there are these really human stories playing out.
It's like you said earlier, 8,000 years of continuous human experience. That's not just a date on a timeline. It's this incredible tapestry of stories, of lives lived, of cultures colliding and blending.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of a deep dive like this, wouldn't you say?
100%. I mean, we've only just scratched the surface here, and I already feel like I need to book a flight to Plovdiv.
Do it. You won't regret it.
To our listeners, if Plovdiv wasn't already on your travel bucket list, I have a feeling it is now. And hey, even if you can't hop on a plane right this second, there's so much more to explore. Dive into those historical accounts, check out those travel blogs, let your curiosity be your guide.
Because Plovdiv, it's more than just a city on a map. It's a testament to human resilience, creativity, the enduring power of culture.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we're going to wrap things up. But remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and who knows, maybe we'll see you in Plovdiv someday.
That'll be fantastic.
Until next time, happy travels, everyone.